Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. This week, we dig into government economic statistics and out-of-control monetary policy. Anchoring our program will be Jerry Jordan, past president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, to discuss his blockbuster paper, The New Monetary Framework. Along the way, we'll chat with John Williams, the publisher of Shadow Stats. But up first, we have Erica Groshen, Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Before I welcome today's guest, I need to make a disclosure. She and I first met 45 years ago at science camp, actually a summer NSF program at Cornell University prior to our senior years in high school. We lost touch but reconnected on Facebook, and I persuaded her to come on the program to tell us how the sausage is made at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Erica, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. It's great to be here.
Erica, I'd like to focus on two important economic measures you're responsible for: employment and inflation, and then broaden out to look at the bigger picture of government statistics in the current world of big data. Let's start by going behind the scenes on how you compile the monthly jobs reports. I understand there are two completely different surveys that generate at least 6 different reported measures. How does that all work?
You're absolutely right that we have these two different measures. The reason we have two measures is because they give us two different lenses on what's going on in the labor market. One lens is how many jobs are employers creating? How many jobs do they have? The other lens is what's going on with families, with households. How many of them have a job? How many of them want to have a job? Firms don't know how many people are looking for a job, so you couldn't ask firms how many unemployed people there were. And households aren't organized by industries. There's certain information that just logistically is a lot easier to get from their employers than it is from the individuals.
So hence the payroll survey and the household survey. How long has the BLS been doing this?
Let's see, the payroll survey may be close to 100 years.
No kidding.
The household survey, I think in the 30s or 40s it started.
This has been going on since before there were computers.
Yes.
In today's computerized world, why do sampling surveys at all? Why not just log on to the Social Security Administration's computers and ask them how many people they collected FICA taxes from that month?
Actually, that information takes a long time to get to those administrative data sources. So the survey right now is the fastest way to do it. For example, the payroll survey. In the space of about a week and a half, we collect information from 146,000 businesses that represent 623 individual work sites and cover about a third of employment. And we do that over the course of a week and a half. We're asking them, how many people did you have on your payrolls during the pay period that includes the 12th of the month? And we turn that around by the first Friday of every month.
And is it the same set of companies every survey?
It is a rolling sample. So we introduce new establishments and old ones cycle off. But from month to month, most of the sample's the same.
So it's like the Dow Jones Industrial Average.
That's right.
And what's the criterion for being included?
It's a stratified random sample. So it's stratified by geography and by industry. And we do a sample from our sample frame, which we put together actually from unemployment insurance records that companies submit. So we use that as our universe, and then we choose randomly from within that to get the establishments that we need for our survey.
So I imagine that established companies are a lot easier to find than startup companies. How do you accurately represent sort of the entrepreneurial startup community?
We represent them in two ways. One is if they were in the universe by the time we draw the sample, then they're in there, and you don't have to have been around too long to, in a year or two, we've got you. Okay. But for the new startups, they are not in the payroll survey. What we do there is an adjustment that adjusts for births and deaths.
Oh, this is the birth-death model.
This is the birth and death model. That's why we need it. Because, you're right, on a month-to-month basis, we can't quickly identify the new startups and measure them regularly.
And is this a fixed number that gets added every month?
No, it's a formula that we use based on a number of different factors that we've modeled over time. And so we estimate what the birth and death rates are likely to be that time of year, these industries, based on how much growth we're seeing in the continuing establishments. And we estimate that, and we put that in, and we report that. It's visible.
And this is like roughly 150,000, something like that?
I don't remember exactly what it is.
And that started in the 80s in the Reagan administration, right?
That adjustment, yeah. But it's been refined over time. It's gotten much better. It used to have a really terrible name. It used to be called the bias adjustment factor.
That's how I remember the story, because Reagan was complaining that the Bureau was undercounting and he was cheating him out of the jobs he was creating. And so out come this bias factor.
Well, eventually we get it right, exactly right, because we benchmark every year to the universe. And so we can pick up anything we've missed.
So you eventually catch up.
We eventually catch up. So it's only off for a while.
Has the BLS ever tried to measure or even estimate employment in the off-the-books cash economy?
We haven't, and that would be very difficult to do. What we're measuring is people on payrolls. Now, if someone has misreported or come up with a fraudulent Social Security number, then they would be on there. The people who wouldn't be on there would be people who are being paid off the books.
So if you slip the plumber cash, that's not going to show up anywhere?
That's not going to show up. Now, if that plumber has a full-time job or a part-time job elsewhere, then they're counted as employed.
I understand the Europeans have been so desperate to show employment, they started counting hookers and drug dealers in their employment numbers. Any plans to do that here?
No. Right. But now you're getting to what is it that's missed in the payroll survey that we want to count anyway. And that's a lot of what we pick up in the household survey. Because in the household survey, we don't ask you if you're working on the books or off the books. We say, did you do any work for pay? Period. And
that's where the U1 through U6 comes from, the household survey?
That's right.
So walk us quickly through those so we understand what they are.
Well, let me start off with telling you about the survey itself. Okay. So remember the payroll survey, which is this highly automated thing that we have working. Companies are sending us their payroll numbers on a monthly basis. The household survey, we take, again, a stratified random sample, but this time it's of addresses in the country. And for the addresses that we choose, we recruit them to respond to our household survey, the current population survey.
So this is like the old Nielsen diaries in a sense.
Something like that. Once we sign them up, we usually ask them for their phone number, and then we call them once a month, and we ask them how every person over the age of 16 is doing. Are they working? Are they in school? A whole bunch of activities.
Are they retired?
Are they retired? Exactly. And from that, we classify them ourselves into three important buckets. Are they out of the labor force? So they're not looking for work and they don't have a job.
So they don't count in either the numerator or the denominator in a sense.
Of the unemployment rate, they don't.
Okay.
Right. Or are they working? Have they done some work for pay during the week that contains the 12th of the month?
Part-time, full-time, doesn't matter. Did you work?
At least an hour.
At least an hour, okay.
At least an hour. Or you don't have a job, but you want a job, and you've looked for work within the past 30 days. And it's not just any kind of looking for work. We have a definition of actively looking. It has to be something that could actually have gotten you a job.
Did you go on an interview? Did you mail out a resume? Did you go to a workshop?
Did you post it on the internet? Something like that.
And then the headline figure is called the U3. Is that the one that the press focuses on?
Right. That's our headline number, the official unemployment rate. It's the one that's most comparable historically and most comparable internationally. But we have a total of 6 measures, 2 of which are more restrictive. So you have to have been unemployed for a long time to be counted as unemployed.
Not just temporary or furloughed. Okay.
Yeah. All the way up to the most inclusive one, U6, where we count as, and it's not really an unemployment rate, it's an underutilization rate. We count as underutilized, not just the people who are unemployed, but the people who are working part-time and would prefer to have a full-time job, and the people who haven't looked for the past 30 days, but want a job and say that the reason that they didn't look in the past 30 days is because they did not believe a job was available for them.
So where does the labor force participation rate number come from?
That comes from the household survey. And the labor force participation rate is everybody who is either employed or unemployed divided by the population, the working age population.
Okay.
Right. So the people who are not participating in the labor force are usually either retired or they are in school or they're doing work inside the home.
Or if you're home on welfare, you're not in the labor force either, correct?
That's right. They're ill, disabled. Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't tell you, though, that when I was in high school, probably around the time you and I met, I got a call on the phone one day, answered it, and it was the BLS calling me to interview me for the current population survey.
Is that what planted the bug?
Who knows? Who knows? Actually, it was the census. The census feels this on our behalf,
Right.
but it was for us.
Why does the BLS seasonally adjust the metrics it publishes? Why not just let the market and its thousands of analysts evaluate the data using their own interpretive adjustments?
The market is perfectly free to do that anytime. We publish our unadjusted data as well as our adjusted data. So we welcome anybody to use their own adjustments. The reason that we do it is we have some expertise in doing it, and it can be beneficial to have everybody talking about data that's been adjusted in the same way.
So it's just a conversation starter.
You could think of it that way. I mean, we think we are using the gold standard techniques for doing it, but somebody else might prefer others.
Are those techniques a fixed and published algorithm, or is there judgment required?
Fixed and published.
Okay, so anybody could run that algorithm if they choose.
Or tweak it in a different way. Yep.
So, Erica, when you and I first entered the workforce 40 years ago, there was still such a thing as lifetime employment with a single company. Labor markets have certainly evolved since then, including a large number of contingent workers, part-timers, self-employed contractors, job hoppers, people like me who have started second careers in their older years. I guess together we call that the gig economy. How have employment statistics changed to reflect this?
One of the virtues of what we collect is there's actually already buckets into which a lot of this work falls, right? So we at BLS have been doing the contingent work survey supplement since something like 1995. Okay. And even in our regular monthly survey, we ask people, are they part-time, are they full-time? And if they're part-time, would they prefer to be full-time, or are they happy part-time? So we have some measures that would pick up a lot of this activity. Self-employed workers is one of the categories within the current population survey. Part-time work and people who have more than one job.
I would think, a lot of people have 2 or 3 now.
Right. But interestingly enough, and this is a puzzle, we haven't seen any recent increase in any of those 3 measures. No sizable increase in part-time employment, no sizable increase in self-employment, or in dual job holding.
How does that fit with the hundreds of thousands of Uber drivers out there?
So there are 3 possible explanations for that, and I don't have an answer yet, but I hope to within a year. The first explanation is that there actually hasn't been that much of an increase. The second explanation is there has been, but we're not measuring it properly, and we need to ask our questions in a slightly different way to pick them up. And the third one is that there were taxi drivers before, and now they're driving for Uber, but they're still contract workers driving taxis. They're just doing it for a different company with a different matching algorithm. So it doesn't show up. In May 2017, when we run the contingent worker survey again, we'll have some questions that will help us to finally answer some of those.
Erica, let's move on to inflation measures, which have changed substantially since Nixon closed the gold window and we went through a decade of massive inflation. The cost of living index used to be based on a fixed basket of goods designed to reflect a constant standard of living. How does the consumer price index measure inflation today?
It's actually the product of 3 different activities. One is we go out there and gather a lot of prices, some the old-fashioned way and some over the internet. So it's a lot of gathering of prices for goods and services. That gives us the price changes that we need. The second thing that we need to do is find out what the market basket is. And you're right, market baskets change. So we do the consumer expenditure survey, and we update that every 2 years, update it to reflect what it is that people are buying. We have another measure that changes it every month, and we can talk about that later. But the CPIU, which is our headline inflation number, has the market basket change every 2 years. Then we do another survey that asks people where it is they bought the things. Because if we're going to price them, we have to price them where they're buying it. Are they buying it online? Are they buying it in a convenience store? Are they buying it at a big box store? That sort of thing. So that's the telephone point of purchase sale, TPOPs. So we put together information from all three of those things. We get the price changes by collecting the information from the stores that the T-POPs indicated, and then we weight the price changes by their share in the market basket.
How is hedonic quality modeling used to lower published inflation measures?
It's really a very simple concept. Let's say you're looking at washing machines and you have in mind a particular kind of washing machines, or we at BLS have been pricing a particular kind of washing machine, and then the model changes. And it's a lot like the one that was before, but it has some new bells and whistles. We could either say, well, it's a brand new product and we're just going to start counting over. Or we can say it's mostly the same thing. It just has a new bell or whistle. So the hedonic models allow us to measure how much of the change from the old model to the new model is really a price increase and how much of it compensates for the new bell and whistle.
That's necessarily subjective, isn't it?
No, it's actually statistical, because what we do is we survey all of the washing machines at the time, and we say for models that other companies are making that have this bell and whistle, how much do they charge, and what's the difference between having it and not? And then we apply it to the one that we're looking at.
So where does the replacement of hamburger for steak fit into the hedonic story?
It wouldn't really, not into the hedonic story, because we're either pricing hamburger or we're pricing steak. So that's
so
not
maybe
in
I have
there.
that mixed up. Is that the substitution?
That's a substitution
Remind us
effect.
what that is.
So this is an interesting element. I'll take you back to some general theory. When we are trying to measure the cost of living...
Putting food on the table.
Yeah, putting food on the table. What we're trying to do is get some idea of how much all prices have gone up. But really and truly, all prices don't go up together evenly. In fact, in our market economy, we want prices to go up at different rates because that's how we get an efficient allocation of goods. So we expect some prices go up, some go down, this and that, and trying to measure cost of living, of course, we want to get an average tendency. But guess what? When the price of beef goes way up, people start buying less beef, they'll buy some more chicken. But if we don't change, and then if the price of beef goes up a little bit more, we don't want to assume that they were still buying that large amount of beef that they were buying before. Or let's do it more dramatic. Think about lobster, right? Say the price of lobster went really high and people stopped buying lobster, except for, the few that could afford it. And then the price of lobster doubles again. Well, for those people who stopped eating lobster 2 years ago or a month ago, it didn't make any difference to their cost of living because they weren't eating it. It's a small part of the basket now. But if we'd left it as a larger part of the basket that it was when it was affordable and everybody had it in their regular diet, then we'd be overestimating inflation.
So by that logic, we could have no inflation but all end up eating Soylent Green. Remember that movie?
I'm not sure I ever saw that one. Anyway.
That's all right. On a more serious note, the CPI plays an important role in both calculating Social Security cost of living adjustments and return adjustments on inflation-protected Treasury securities. You would think this would create enormous bipartisan pressure to keep the reported numbers down to save the government money. How does the BLS manage these kinds of pressures?
Well, let me just say, of course, it's not just pressure from the government to keep them down. There's also pressure from people who represent the beneficiaries who would like it to be higher. So the pressure can go in both directions. But the wisdom of our statistical system is pretty amazing. The statistical agencies have been designed to be independent of those pressures. For instance, at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there is only one person in the whole Bureau that's a presidential appointment, and that's me. Everybody else is a career. And even I have a term appointment. I do not serve at the pleasure of the president. I cannot be fired by reporting something that the president doesn't like.
Could you be impeached?
There are probably things I could do that would that would mean I lost my job, but it wouldn't be reporting a number that...
They can't be angry at your numbers.
That's right. That's right. And there's a branch of OMB that works with us to ensure our independence, has a set of practices that we're required to follow. including, for instance, for our principal federal economic indicators, we have to announce the date where we are going to release them, and we must meet that date. We can't release it in the dead of night on Saturday. We can't. We can't aim for the middle of the Super Bowl or whatever. You know,
let's find a quiet time. And slip
that's
this
right.
in.
Or find a time that will attract attention. We have to announce that in advance, and we have to follow a lot of procedures that keep us independent. So while I am a part of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is a part of the Department of Labor administratively, we are independent of the Department of Labor as far as our statistical mission goes. So the secretary does not see numbers before they're final either, and only under lockup conditions.
Erica, there was a time when only the government was in a position to collect the kind of macroeconomic data required to calculate and publish the sorts of aggregate economic statistics that markets rely on. That's changed with the advent of big data. Could private programs like the Billion Prices Project one day supplant government statistics collection?
Yeah, that's a great question that a lot of people have been asking me lately. And the first part of the answer is, welcome to our world, big data guys. We were big data long before you. We use administrative data. We always have. We will continue to do so. But we have comparative advantages that the private sector doesn't have, and vice versa. So we, for example, have access to universe information, the census information on everybody's household data. That's confidential. Nobody else has access to it for good reason. The same way with our sample frame of companies is confidential data that is not publicly available, again, for privacy reasons. But we are the ones who can use that to create good statistics. The private sector has an advantage in a kind of flexibility and ability to adapt that we who are trying to preserve continuity and historical series aren't going to be able to do as quickly. So we can learn from the things that they're doing, and we can tap into some of the sources that they're using. But, you wouldn't want us to be competing with them directly for meeting those private needs that others are willing to pay for. So we provide a public good, and they provide a private good, which are complementary. They need us. Billion Prices, great program. What do? They use our consumer expenditure survey so that they can weight the price changes that they detect over the internet. And they use the price changes that we collect for the things that they can't find on the internet.
So at the end of the day, the market will look at both and make their own judgments.
Absolutely, and they will complement each other.
Our final guest today is your old boss, Jerry Jordan, past president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. Given Janet Yellen's flip-flopping on returning the country to interest rate normality, has the BLS become the tail wagging the Federal Reserve dog?
Absolutely not. We know very much what's our job and what our job isn't. So, for example, we have a BLS saying about, how's the BLS answer the question, is the glass half empty or glass half full? We have a BLS answer. This is an 8-ounce container. It has 4 ounces of liquid in it. Right?
Make your own judgment.
Make your own judgment. Move ahead with the policy decisions you have to make on the basis of this impartial data that we supply.
Well, Erica, I have to say, after studying special relativity with you 45 years ago, it's a delight to see you again. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Bill. It's a pleasure to talk to you and your audience.
That was Erica Groshen, Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. Real Clear Radio Hour is a not-for-profit, donor-supported program produced in conjunction with Real Clear Politics, America's premier independent political website. To make sure you don't miss any of our shows, stop by realclearradio.org and sign up for updates. Today's program was partially underwritten by the generous support of Old Boston Restorations, a Victorian property management company in Boston South End. Visit them online at oldbostonrestorations.com. Ahead, we'll speak with John Williams, the publisher of Shadow Stats. Stay tuned.